Go eat in the kitchen, Black. The words did not slip. They were launched like a knife across the dining hall, deliberate and sharpened. Claire Whitmore, Vice President of Procurement, leaned back in her chair as if she had just spoken common sense. The mahogany table fell silent. Forks hovered in midair. A chandelier hummed faintly above, and all eyes swung toward Naomi Carter. She did not move. Her burnt orange dress glowed against the cream walls, but her face remained unreadable, still as stone. Richard Vale, the chairman at the head of the table, smirked as if to soften the insult with humor. "Do not take it personally," he said. "We simply have standards. This table is curated for executives." His chuckle carried a current of arrogance, and several guests let out a ripple of laughter that sounded rehearsed. Naomi placed one hand on the back of her chair. "Are those official remarks, Miss Whitmore?" Her tone was calm, steady, but the stillness made the question heavier than any shout. Claire tilted her glass, eyes glinting. "Official enough. Power seats are not for appearances. They are earned." At the far end, a young analyst named Lena Tran shifted in her seat. Her hands trembled under the table as she unlocked her phone. The red circle of a recording app began to glow, hidden from sight. No one noticed when Naomi's other hand brushed her phone. A soft blue pulse flashed once. P12. Armed. She lowered herself into the chair deliberately, her silence louder than the insult. Richard raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, "to real partners." Crystal clinked. The room tried to resume its rhythm, but the air had shifted. Lena's phone kept recording. The faint screen reflection captured something strange. The place card in front of Naomi did not match the seating chart. Someone had switched it. Naomi noticed, too. She did not speak. She simply placed a sealed red envelope on the table before her plate. The envelope sat there, unaddressed, waiting like a silent witness. Claire's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly is that?" Naomi did not answer. She let the envelope rest untouched. The chandelier's glow made the wax seal shine faintly, daring someone to open it. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here." Now, back to Naomi. The dinner resumed with forced small talk, but every eye stole glances at the unopened envelope. Its presence turned the table into a stage, and everyone into an unwilling actor. Naomi Carter had not yet spoken her full truth. She did not need to. The room had already started to betray itself. The envelope stayed on the table like a wound that refused to close. Every silver fork gleamed in the chandelier's light, but it was the wax seal that held the room hostage. Claire's tone sharpened. "Are we passing notes at dinner, Miss Carter? Or is this your application to join the adults?" Her smirk earned another ripple of laughter. Naomi said nothing. She slid the envelope toward Richard Vale, the chairman, her eyes never leaving his. He hesitated, then cracked the seal. The flap opened with a soft tear that sounded louder than any voice. Inside was not a contract, not a seating card, but a photograph. Richard pulled it halfway into the light. An industrial kitchen, stainless steel counters, and in the foreground a shipment label blurred by a thick black mark. His brows furrowed. "What is this supposed to mean?" Naomi leaned back, calm. "It means you may want to finish your toast carefully." The table shifted uneasily. A few executives glanced at the photo, then back at her, unsure why a picture of a kitchen would arrive at a dinner worth billions. At the far end, Lena Tran pressed her phone tighter against her lap. Her screen had captured something the others had missed. The seating chart glowing faintly on a tablet at the corner of the room. One name had been erased, Naomi Carter, a blank space where her seat should have been. Lena's breath caught. She whispered into her mic, "This was intentional." But no one heard her. The air filled with the clinking of glasses again, a forced attempt to drown out the tension. Richard folded the photograph, tucking it beneath his plate. His voice carried false warmth. "Shall we move on? There is real business tonight." Naomi rested her hand over her phone again. The blue pulse of P12 flickered once more, unnoticed by most. Claire leaned closer across the table, lowering her voice. "Photographs and riddles will not buy you a seat here. You will need proof." Naomi's reply was calm, steady. "Proof is patient. It always arrives." The chandelier hummed. The envelope lay open, its seal broken, its secret only half revealed. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what do you think was blacked out on that label? And if you believe this dinner is hiding something darker than arrogance, hit like and subscribe. This story has only begun. Naomi lifted her glass at last, her silence echoing louder than the laughter around her. She sipped once, her eyes steady on Richard Vale. And for the first time, he looked away. Now you have no name at this table. Claire's voice was sharp, triumphant. She held the torn halves of Naomi's business card between her manicured fingers and let them fall onto the white linen. The small pieces landed beside the untouched bread plate, fragments of identity treated like crumbs. The act was small, almost childish, but it carried weight, a deliberate stripping of presence. A declaration that Naomi Carter was not meant to exist here, not even as ink on paper. Naomi's face remained still. Her burnt orange dress caught the chandelier light, but her expression betrayed nothing. If she felt anger, it was buried deep, beyond their reach. Richard Vale forced a laugh, his tone coated with condescension. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not forget why we are gathered. We celebrate partnerships, not pettiness. Yet as he spoke, his hand slid discreetly beneath his plate, tucking the folded photograph deeper out of sight. The photograph, the industrial kitchen, the blacked-out label still unexplained, still looming. Richard wanted it gone, but Lena Tran, seated at the far end, had already recorded everything. Her phone lens caught the exact moment his hand trembled, the exact angle of concealment. She whispered into her mic, "He is hiding evidence." Across the table, murmurs rose. One executive leaned toward another, whispering just loud enough, "Perhaps we should call security." End this distraction before it unravels further. The word security drifted around the table like a contagion, each repetition laced with unease. Heads nodded, the tension building into a quiet vote against Naomi's presence. Naomi lifted her glass with slow precision. The crystal stem glinted in her hand. She spoke softly, her voice calm yet edged with steel. "Security is useful when there is a threat. So tell me, what exactly do you fear tonight?" The air shifted, the laughter faded, the chandelier buzzed faintly overhead, and Claire's confident posture faltered for the first time. Richard's eyes flicked to the open envelope, the broken seal, the empty space where the photo had been. The longer it remained hidden, the more power it seemed to hold. His smile was strained now, stretched thin across his face. Naomi set her glass down with finality. The torn fragments of her name still lay scattered, ignored by her but impossible for the others to look away from. She glanced once at Claire, then at Richard, before letting her gaze rest on the entire table. "Names can be torn," she said evenly. "Truth cannot." The words landed heavy, undeniable, and in that moment, Naomi's phone vibrated softly against the tablecloth. Its screen flickered, a message appearing for only her eyes. Lot KX 731, identified. Her hand moved casually, covering the glow before anyone else could notice. The dinner continued, but the balance had shifted again. Something larger than arrogance was about to break through the surface. The word hung in the air like smoke. Security. One of the senior executives said it louder this time, as if summoning order. "We should remove her before this becomes a spectacle." A murmur of agreement circled the table. The suggestion gave them courage, a way to mask their discomfort with authority. Richard nodded faintly, his eyes still avoiding Naomi's, his hand resting on the plate that concealed the photograph. Claire smirked. "Better late than never. Call them. This dinner is for decision-makers, not distractions." Naomi lifted her gaze slowly. She did not raise her voice, yet the silence that followed made her words ring clear. "If this table requires security to silence one chair, then perhaps the wrong people are sitting here." The room shifted. Forks clinked. A glass tipped slightly, rescued before it spilled. At the far end, Lena Tran's phone continued recording. Her screen now displayed a frozen frame. The photograph Richard had hidden. She whispered, "The label, the part that is blacked out, it might be important." But she stopped herself, because she had no proof yet, not enough to connect it. Naomi's phone vibrated again. She moved her hand over it casually. Another short message flashed across the screen. "Lot KX 730, one link to Whitehall Provisions." Her eyes flickered, but her expression did not. She folded her hands, resting them on the table. "Before we continue, tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone silenced simply because they made others uncomfortable? Drop your thoughts below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us of what power really looks like. Now, back to Naomi. Richard finally broke the silence. Enough. Someone bring security. He gestured toward a staff member at the door. The server froze, his tray trembling slightly, eyes darting between Naomi and the men at the table. Naomi leaned forward, her voice even. Be very sure, Richard. Once you invite security into a room like this, you cannot control what they hear or what they see. A ripple of unease spread. For a moment, no one moved. Claire scoffed. Empty words. You are bluffing. She reached for her glass, but her hand brushed against the torn business card fragments still scattered near Naomi's plate. She froze, her smirk fading for the first time. Richard's hand pressed harder against the hidden photo under his plate, as if afraid it might slide into the open. And then Naomi spoke again, almost as an aside. Perhaps they should also see the shipment logs. The executive stiffened. No one asked her to explain. Not yet. But the question was already alive. What shipment logs? The double doors creaked. Two uniformed security officers stepped into the dining hall, their polished shoes tapping against the marble. Every head turned, a collective breath of relief from the executives who believed order was about to be restored. Richard exhaled heavily. Gentlemen, please escort Miss Carter outside. She has disrupted this dinner long enough. The taller officer nodded, but Naomi raised her hand slightly. Her voice was calm, deliberate. Before you make a move, you should know this is being recorded. The younger officer frowned. Recorded? Lena's phone trembled in her hands. She had not expected Naomi to acknowledge it, but the words landed like an invitation. Several other diners now realized that devices around the room were lit, cameras angled, streams quietly alive. Naomi leaned forward. When security steps into a room, you become part of the record. Every action, every word, logged forever. The taller officer hesitated. His gaze flicked from Naomi to Richard, then back again. What exactly is happening here? He asked. Richard bristled. What is happening is simple. This guest is not authorized to sit at this table. Naomi's eyes stayed fixed on him. Authorized by whom, Richard? The same system that erased my name from the seating chart? The words landed like a blow. Lena nearly gasped. She had seen the missing entry on the tablet but had not spoken it aloud. Naomi had just exposed it in front of everyone. Claire's smirk faltered. She lifted her glass to disguise her unease, but her hand brushed the torn fragments of Naomi's card again. This time, her fingers lingered as if touching something dangerous. Naomi's phone buzzed once more. She slid it slightly forward, letting the blue light reflect across the crystal glasses. The message was brief, only for her eyes. Shipment log, lot KX 730, one delivered same day as outbreak. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, would you trust the people at this table or the silence that Naomi is holding? Drop your thoughts below, and if you believe truth cannot be hidden forever, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter. Now, back to Naomi. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, what outbreak are you referring to? His question froze the room. Richard's hands stiffened over his plate. Claire's wine glass tilted, spilling a crimson drop onto the linen. Naomi did not answer directly. She folded her hands. Ask your employers what they fed to children last week. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The room that once applauded Richard now seemed to lean toward Naomi, drawn not by her words alone, but by the weight of what remained unsaid. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the chandelier. The security officers stood stiff, unsure whether to move closer or step back. Naomi placed a small silver device on the table. It looked ordinary, almost delicate against the heavy wood. With a calm press of her finger, the room filled with sound. It was not music, it was coughing. The shallow, ragged cough of a child, followed by another, and then another. The sound clawed into the hall, cutting through the crystal and linen like broken glass. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Claire's smirk vanished. Richard gripped the stem of his wine glass so tightly it might have snapped. Naomi let the recording play for 10 seconds, then pressed pause. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound itself. This, she said evenly, is what lot KX 731 delivered. The younger officer swallowed. Children? His voice cracked. Naomi nodded once. Children. Hospitals. Training camps. Schools. They ate what your supplier provided. They carried lot KX 731 into their bodies. Or? Lena's phone shook in her hands. Her recording caught every word, every cough, every pale reaction at the table. She whispered into her mic, "The evidence is real." Richard finally slammed his glass down. "This is manipulation. Sounds can be fabricated." Naomi's gaze did not waver. "Fabricated, Richard? Or hidden?" Her voice carried like a blade. "The logs do not lie." Claire's hand trembled. She tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. "Even if that were true, no one will connect it here, not tonight." Naomi leaned forward, her voice calm. "Then perhaps you should explain why your name appears in the approval chain." Claire froze. The color drained from her face. "Before we continue, tell us in the comments if you were seated at this table. Would you believe the sound of those children or the polished excuses of executives? Drop your answer below. And if you believe truth deserves a voice, like this video and subscribe. These stories spark change. Now, back to Naomi. The older officer stepped closer, his eyes on Richard now. "Sir, is this accurate? Did your company handle this shipment?" Richard's face hardened. He did not answer. Naomi pressed the device again. This time, the recording did not play coughing. Instead, it clicked to a muffled voice memo. "Do not report the outbreak until after the dinner. Shift the lots. Clean the logs." The voice was distorted but recognizable. Several heads turned toward Claire instantly. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble floor. Shards of glass glittered on the marble floor where Claire's wine had fallen. The sound still echoed in the heavy silence. Naomi reached into her bag. She pulled out a slim leather folder and laid it carefully on the table. The executives leaned in despite themselves, their curiosity pulling them closer even as fear tightened their throats. "This," Naomi said, her tone level, "is the shipment record for lot KX 731. She opened the folder. Pages of printed logs, highlighted columns, and digital timestamps stared back at the room. She tapped one line with her finger. Delivery date. Destination, Whitehall Provisions, Subcontracted Kitchens. Recipient signature, Claire Whitmore. The officers exchanged looks. Lena's phone camera zoomed in, catching the name clearly printed. Claire's hand shot out as if to snatch the page, but Naomi slid the folder back toward herself. "Careful," Naomi said softly. "These pages have been notarized." Claire's face flushed crimson. "This is a fabrication. Anyone can alter a log." Naomi did not flinch. She flipped to another page. Audit trail. Every edit is time-stamped. And here, look closely. An attempt to delete the entry. Logged at midnight, the night before this dinner. Authorized by Arvale. The chairman's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The younger officer leaned forward. "Sir, did you attempt to alter official supply records?" Richard slammed his palm onto the table. "Enough of this circus. These documents are out of context." Naomi folded her hands. "Context? Then let us provide more." She gestured toward Lena. "Play the recording again, from the moment the voice spoke of cleaning the logs." Lena hesitated, then pressed play. The distorted voice returned. "Shift the lots. Clean the logs. Do not let it surface before the dinner." This time, everyone heard it clearly, and everyone knew who the voice resembled. Before we continue, what do you think should executives who falsify records face public trials or private settlements? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe truth deserves daylight, hit like and subscribe. These stories must be heard. Now, back to Naomi. Claire pushed her chair back suddenly. "This is slander." "You cannot." Her protest was cut short as the server near the door stepped forward nervously. In his trembling hands was a folded slip of paper. I found this in the kitchen earlier." All eyes turned. The slip shook in his grip. Naomi extended her hand calmly. "Bring it here." The server hesitated, then placed the folded note into Naomi's palm. She did not open it yet. She let it rest there, closed, as the weight of its presence pressed against every person at the table. The folded slip rested in Naomi's palm like a live coal. She did not rush. She let the tension spread across the table, every second of silence deepening the unease. Finally, she unfolded it. The paper was creased, stained faintly with grease, as if torn from a clipboard in the kitchen. Written in hurried ink were just 5 lines. Lot KX 731. Whitehall Provisions. Delivery rerouted. Waste disposal signed. Keep quiet. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, but the meaning struck like thunder. Naomi placed the slip flat on the table for all to see. Richard's lips parted, but no words came. Claire gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Naomi's voice was calm. Waste disposal. That is where the shipment ended up. Not in storage, not in clean kitchens. In disposal, mixed with medical refuse. Gasps rippled around the table. The officers stiffened. Lena captured every angle, her phone camera unblinking. Richard tried to recover. That slip could be written by anyone. A note in a kitchen does not carry weight. Naomi met his eyes. Then perhaps you should explain why the signature on the disposal matches your procurement chain. The younger officer leaned closer to the slip, his brow furrowed. This is consistent with the logs she showed earlier. The lot was rerouted. Claire shook her head violently. No, this is a setup. It is a smear campaign. Naomi folded the slip once more and held it lightly. A smear campaign does not leave children coughing blood. A smear campaign does not bury shipments in medical waste. The chandelier above flickered, as if the light itself recoiled from the words. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, what would you do if you held evidence in your hands that could destroy the powerful? Would you risk speaking it aloud? Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe silence is complicity, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Naomi. The taller officer cleared his throat. Miss Carter, do you have further evidence? Naomi looked at him steadily. Evidence has a way of multiplying when truth is forced into the open. Her phone buzzed again. This time the screen displayed not just a message, but a file name. Audit, B2, internal. She let the glow linger just long enough for Richard to notice. His face drained of color. Where did you get that? He whispered. Naomi did not answer. She slid the phone face down on the table, leaving the implication to burn in the silence. The phone lay face down, its glow faint under the chandelier's reflection. Naomi lifted it slowly, turning the screen upright for the first time. The words were sharp on the glass. Audit, B2, internal, PDF. Every executive leaned forward despite themselves. Curiosity cut through their fear. Naomi tapped once. The document opened. Lines of internal correspondence, inspection notes, and redacted signatures filled the screen. She scrolled with calm precision, letting the officers see each entry. Page 1. Naomi said, her voice steady. Initial flag, contamination risk reported at Whitehall Kitchens, risk level, red. She scrolled again. Page 2, directive from procurement leadership to downgrade contamination from red to yellow, justification, public relations risk. The younger officer read over her shoulder. His jaw tightened. Naomi continued. Page 3, explicit order to reroute contaminated stock to disposal, signed, R. Vale. Gasps rippled down the table. Richard Vale's chair creaked as he leaned back, his face drained of all authority. Claire shifted violently in her seat. These are internal drafts. They were never finalized. They cannot be authenticated. Naomi locked her eyes on her. Audit trails authenticate themselves. Every keystroke is stamped. 1. The taller officer crossed his arms. Ma'am, do you have proof of those timestamps? Naomi turned the phone. A series of digital footprints glowed, user IDs, edit times, deletion attempts. Each one undeniable. Richard finally snapped. Enough. You are poisoning this room with half-truths and scraps of paper. Naomi's reply was razor thin. Scraps of paper do not bleed. Children did. The chandelier buzzed. No one laughed now. No one dared to move. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, should internal audits like this be released to the public, even if they shake entire industries? Drop your answer below. And if you believe truth is worth the discomfort, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Naomi. The younger officer whispered to his partner, "We may have to escalate this." Naomi heard, and for the first time, she allowed a small smile. Escalation is overdue. She tapped to the final page of the audit. A line of text stood out, unredacted and blunt. Proceed with suppression plan until contract is signed. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena gasped audibly. The server at the door crossed himself under his breath. Naomi placed the phone flat on the table. Now the question is not whether contamination happened. The question is who ordered the suppression, and why they thought no one would ever ask. The words on the audit document glowed across the polished table. Proceed with suppression plan until contract is signed. Silence pressed down on the hall. Everyone knew what those words meant, but no one dared to voice it. Naomi broke the stillness. The outbreak was not simply an accident swept under the rug. It was a calculation, a decision to hide sickness until the ink was dry. The taller officer leaned in. "Ma'am, are you saying this contract was conditional on silence?" Naomi's eyes locked on Richard. "I am saying the very meal you sit at is built on silence. Every toast, every polished plate tonight is meant to distract from what you buried in waste bins." Richard's voice cracked with fury. "You cannot prove intent." Naomi tapped the audit again. "Intent is written here. Proceed until contract is signed. That is not negligence, that is motive." Claire's hand shook around her glass. She tried to speak, but Naomi cut across her. "You pushed signatures. You altered risk levels, because this dinner was more valuable than the truth. Children coughing was a cost you were willing to pay for applause, tonight." Gasps spread down the table. The chandelier hummed as if echoing the tension. "Before we continue, tell us in the comments, do you think covering up harm is worse than causing it in the first place? Drop your answer below. And if you believe truth should never be for sale, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter. Now, back to Naomi. The younger officer's voice trembled. "If this is correct, the suppression was deliberate. That is criminal." Richard slammed his fist against the table. "This dinner is not a courtroom." Naomi leaned forward. "Then perhaps you should stop acting like defendants." The server near the door shifted nervously. His eyes darted to the executives, then to Naomi. Finally he spoke. "There is more." Every head turned. The man swallowed hard. "I saw a second envelope in the kitchen, marked B chain. I was told to destroy it." Naomi's gaze sharpened. "Did you keep it?" The server hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I hid it." The air cracked with shock. Richard's face drained of color. Claire muttered something under her breath, too low for anyone to catch. Naomi sat back. "Then the story is not finished. Bring me that envelope." The server's hands trembled as he reached into his apron. From beneath folded fabric, he pulled out a second envelope thicker, stamped with a faint red mark, B, chain. The room held its breath as he placed it on the table before Naomi. Naomi rested her fingers lightly on the envelope. She glanced around the table once, her gaze sweeping over every face, the officers, Lena, the executives shrinking in their seats. Finally, she broke the seal. Inside were several folded sheets. She spread them carefully across the tablecloth. Handwritten notes, stamped approvals, and an attached memo with one unmistakable title, Back Chain Diversion Protocol. Naomi's voice was calm. "This is the second layer. The plan to reroute contaminated shipments into shadow channels, labeled as secondary supplies, hospitals, camps, schools, places where oversight is weakest." The younger officer leaned forward, scanning the memo. "This outlines a deliberate system, not an accident. Not a single shipment." Naomi nodded. "Exactly. A chain, not a mistake." Richard's hand shook visibly now. "Those papers mean nothing without signatures." Naomi lifted the final page. At the bottom, two names glared in black ink. Richard Vale, Claire Whitmore. Gasps erupted. Claire's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her face was drained of all color. "Before we continue, tell us in the comments, should leaders who knowingly endanger lives face prison, even if they sit in boardrooms? Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe justice must rise above privilege, like this video and subscribe. These stories matter. Now, back to Naomi. Claire finally managed words, her voice cracking. "Those are drafts, Naomi. Drafts do not bind." Naomi met her eyes. "Drafts do not kill children. Chains of supply do." The chandelier buzzed. The air thickened, every person weighed down by the words on the paper. The taller officer picked up one sheet, his hands steady. "This is enough to initiate a full federal investigation." Richard slammed his chair back. "You think you can end me with scraps of paper?" Naomi folded her hands, her calm unshaken. "I do not need to end you, Richard. You ended yourself when you put ink to those pages." At that moment, Lena's phone buzzed. A new message appeared on her screen from an unknown source. "Check Annex C. It reveals ownership." Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. Not yet. The hall felt smaller now, the chandelier's light dimming against the weight of truth. Papers from the B-chain envelope lay scattered across the table, signatures undeniable. But Naomi was not finished. She turned her gaze to Lena. "You received a message, did you not?" Lena froze. Slowly, She nodded and slid her phone across the table. On the screen, one line glowed. Check Annex C ownership. Naomi tapped her own phone. With deliberate calm, she opened a file labeled Annex C, contractual holdings. The screen filled with corporate diagrams, stock ledgers, and controlling interests. Annex C, Naomi said evenly, is the part none of you wanted public. It shows not just who signed, but who owned. Ownership of Whitehall provisions. Ownership of this very building. Ownership of the chain that fed contaminated shipments. She paused. Ownership that traces here. She pointed to the diagram. At the very top, her own name. Naomi Carter Holdings. 51% controlling interest. Gasps tore through the room. Richard staggered back in his chair. Claire clutched the table as if it might anchor her sinking. Naomi's voice sharpened. You tried to erase me from a seat I already owned. You mocked me as an outsider in a building I control. You gambled lives for a contract you thought I needed. To Grader. The younger officer whispered, She owns all of this. Naomi nodded once. And because I own it, I now cancel it. Effective immediately, Whitehall Provisions' $2.5 billion contract is terminated. The officers scribbled notes. Lena's camera streamed the moment live. The server wept quietly by the door. Before we close, tell us in the comments, what do you feel when arrogance meets justice head-on? Drop your answer below, and if you believe dignity is power, like this video and subscribe. These stories shine light where it is most needed. Now, back to Naomi. Naomi rose to her feet. Her burnt orange dress glowed in the dim light, no longer a target but a banner. She gathered the scattered papers calmly, as if tidying away a lesson. Her final words were soft but cut through the room. You did not just lose a contract. You lost the right to feed people. She walked toward the doors. The officers stepped aside. The executives sat frozen, stripped of their laughter, their privilege, their power. And for the first time that evening, silence felt like justice.